Archiving started.
Yes, thank you. We're really fortunate tonight to have Professor Shute from Florida State University. And I've been looking forward to this talk for quite a while, Val. And Val is going to talk to us tonight about stealth assessment, embedded evidence-based assessment in games. It's something that I've been particularly interested in for a while, and I know a lot of people. This will be really fascinating for them. One of the things that we've been trying to do throughout this webinar series is to bring up new topics, new ideas, new ways of looking at assessment, and this is certainly one of those to probably rethink the way that we do assessment. And as I said, I've been looking forward to this for a while. I've been reading Val's papers for a while now, and really looking forward to hearing Val talk about a new way for us to think about our assessment practices in education. So Val, I'll hand over to you now. You can leave your mic on all the time, Val.
Okay, I did. Jeff was handing this off to me or to Matthew. And I think what we're going to be doing is mapping the slides because I have some serious graphical delays on my end. I'm saying welcome to everybody. Good morning to my people here, and good evening to a lot of you in Australia. So when I was not hearing, about every 10th word or so was dropping. So can you all just hear me? I'm going to try to talk slower than normal. And we can try to increase the chances of words getting through. So, or by a hand raised in the interface. I don't see anything on the screen yet.
Certainly at this end, we're seeing the survey slide. Val, do you not see
the screen that? On my end is current. I see a big blank screen, and then all I see is the little text box at the bottom of the chat. A list of people participating. But I do have hard copies. So we could try to do this blind, I guess. Blind on my end. Okay, so a couple people have weighed in that I guess, but we'll go ahead and start because there's not that much time. I would say to get a sense of the landscape, I guess the attitude-scape of the people that are here, by clicking on the check for yes or the X for no, how many of you, and by digital games, I'm talking about anything on a console or particularly, I mean, maybe maybe 1 hour a week. And on that, there'll probably be a delay.
Hopefully, Val, you're seeing ticks and crosses come up at the bottom there.
Delightfully a lot of checks. So there's a lot of people. Many of you think that games have no place in school, where schools are, serious business, the brain and so forth. And I still see no image at all, which is a little disconcerting. Okay, so there's some seasonal players here. So the second games have no place in school. So a yes on that was school at all because games, school is a serious place. Okay. Let's go ahead and advance the slide. There should be their games, learning, and assessment. So can you, I feel a little like Helen Keller. Hello?
That's fine. The first slide is up, Val, so just keep going.
All right. Like some people are not able to hear me without. What I'm going to talk about, I guess, in the next 40 minutes is about game assessment in relation to the 21st century competence. That playing well-designed games can enhance learning, and you know, the more conferences you go to, the more research. A bunch of important learning and development goes on within such games. But what I want to talk about is what exactly educationally valuable knowledge and skills, especially in relation to the 21st century, and how can these claims be substantiated? So answer those questions during my presentation. And can you do the next slide, please? It should be 3 claims that are up on this vast space of whiteness where graphics should be. But the first claim, does anybody see design games can act as transformative learning environments to support the development of skills across a wide range of so the first claim has to do with the idea that good games and they can support the development of skills across a whole range of critical educational areas and also support meaningful learning. The second is best when it's active and when it's goal-oriented, and especially when it's contextualized within interesting and the features of good games as well as good instructional design. And the third, the third claim is that self-assessment can gather dynamic evidence of learning to make inferences about competencies at different grain sizes, which can then be used to support learning. And show my game plan, a 5-fold game, and I'm not sure if it's up. Yeah, I'm sorry about my words being cut off. I have right now. So the game plan is up, and I'd like to start by defining just what well-designed educational games, and also describe just what I mean by learning. I'm going to then describe my self-assessment approach, and that, of course, is intended to blur the distinction between assessment I'll provide an example of the approach within a particular game that I've been working with, and then I'd like to answer any questions. Next slide should just be a transition slide, and it should say something like 21st century. Go past that, and then get to the next slide, which should have two pictures, one of a classroom. As I say, I got those both off the internet, very cool pictures, kind of weird, similar, and they're 100 years apart. But anyway, this slide is showing how the world has, that education hasn't changed that much. And the problem, there's 3 R's, and here that stands for reading, writing, and arithmetic. Back then, you were considered to be sufficiently literate was to prepare young people for production jobs. Something like 90% of the students were not expected to hold any. But when faced with the complexity of the world today, we absolutely need to what some people are calling 21st century competencies. So if you advance the slide, please. This says 21st century skills. And I'm waiting. That slide is in place.
Yes, it's up, Val.
Is anyone still there? Can you?
Yep, Val, we're all still here. Yep.
I don't see any check marks. All right. I apologize for this kind of blind. With the 21st century skills slide, the idea is that today's kids citizens of the world. So, for instance, when we're faced with complex, to be able to think creatively and critically and collaboratively and to communicate effectively. The idea is that the world where we all live right are connected, and this is especially in comparison to the really old days. And if you can so presuming that slide is up, as you can see, learned how to do things, the competencies that were important back then was, how to hunt and how to make fire. Flat and simple, especially in comparison today. So advancing to the next slide. People, my screen just came alive. That's a nice. Okay, so we're now at slide, and the idea here is the 21st century competencies that are believed to be important for people to lead successful lives in today's world. The Stone Age people on my screen, but now I'm ready to advance to the next slide, which should
Val,
can I get some feedback?
I'm just wondering whether we
might,
in place, Val?
Because what I'm seeing is still the stone.
Val, we're just Matthew and I are just discussing whether we'll get you
Hello?
to call the number.
Yes.
Val, can you hear me? Yeah, we're just wondering whether we'll get you to use the phone number. That will be a free call for call in. Matthew, you go on.
Okay. Let me try that right now. I called the United States number.
Yeah, if you call that number, then at least what should happen is we should get your voice the whole time then, if you're breaking up, because I think it's probably fairly frustrating for people, and I really do apologise for this, because it must be something to do with the line between here and the US.
Excellent. All right, then let's coordinate where we are with the slides. I have the Stone Age people showing up on my screen, but there should be a slide that shows a pair of hands holding the world, and this is a picture of all the different, there's a bunch of different ways and different taxonomies about just what comprises 21st century competencies.
Yes, that's up now.
Okay, good. So this slide just is showing a few of the 21st century competencies that are of interest to me, my colleagues, and my students, and I'm going to be focusing on systems thinking. So advancing to the next slide shows some challenges with this, where one of the main problems standing in the way of schools fully embracing these new competencies is the lack of valid and reliable
You have the next slide, Matthew? Thanks.
Yeah, so this should be a challenges slide. So our old ways of testing, and this is something I'm pretty passionate about, will not work as learning to support kids in terms of learning and succeeding in the complex world. And they can't easily or optimally be measured. The 21st century competencies can't be easily or optimally measured by simply filling in bubbles on a prepared multiple choice kind of test form. So we really need to rethink assessment. So my question is, what about using games as vehicles to assess and support complex new competencies? So if you want to go to the next slide, there should be a picture of a golf course with games in the center of it. And with regard to the kind of most succinct definition of games that I found, Bernard Suits, I think around 1979 or something, has succinctly defined a game as unnecessary obstacles that we choose to overcome. I think that's an awesome definition. The example that he uses was golf, where the goal very simply is to get a ball in a little hole. And in real life, you could just pick up the ball and put it in the hole, but there's all the rules of golf along with all the various challenges and obstacles which, make that really, really hard and thus all the more compelling. For example, you have to use a stick with a club on the end of it. You have to stand 200 yards away from the hole. You have all the sand traps and stuff. So it makes the game all the more, complex and thus compelling. So when I say games, I'm going to be referring to digital games, and that includes games played on gaming consoles, on computers, and on mobile devices, and so forth. So I'd like to switch to the next slide, which I think should be some pictures, some photographs of game faces. Again, I still have the Stone Age people graphic up. But in this, on this slide here, this is just showing some examples of game faces with the idea that they come in all sizes, shapes, and ages. And advancing to the next slide, it's a context slide of pictures. And these are the traditional or the control condition faces with not very much engagement at all being present. So, so the next slide should show a list of 7 good game elements. The idea here is that digital games differ on a whole lot of different dimensions. They differ in terms of the genre, the content that's present, the platform. But my position is that good games are a system, and they consist of 7 core elements. And I've got those listed in the slide you should be seeing. And I'll just list these here, and then I have, I think, 7 subsequent slides to go through them in a little more detail. Interactive problem solving, specific goals and rules, adaptive challenges, control, ongoing feedback, uncertainty, and sensory stimuli. So there's other elements that can be present in a game, like competition or cooperation, mystery, fantasy, discovery, the ability to fail and recover, but those aren't necessarily core elements. So the idea is that all these different elements have to be present and functionally interacting to be able to be called a good game. So the next slide shows the first element, which is this idea of interactive problem solving. And here, games require this kind of constant interplayer interaction between the player and the game. And that player is really what drives and sustains gameplay. And most games also require problems to be solved. These can be very complex, and they can require the application of a whole lot of different competencies like creativity and, of course, persistence. And now I have, can you still hear me? Because now I have blank in the upper screen, and that's a white screen, and now I have blank down at the bottom, so I can't even see chat. Can you still hear me? Or
yeah, Val, we can hear you fine. Yeah, it's fine, and all the slides are coming up fine. Everything at our end is fine. I'm just very sorry that you're flying blind at the other end there. But please be assured everything's going okay at the other end. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask an interactive question, actually a series of interactive questions. What I had done for the series of slides here about the game elements is the pictures that I had included were some of my favorite games, and I wanted to see if anybody could identify them. But this particular, it's literally a big blank all the way across at the bottom, big black blankness. So I can't see any of the buttons or any of the chat. So I'll just go ahead and say this graphic right there with the interactive problem solving is a snippet from the world of Goo, one of my favorite games. The next slide should be about goals. That's the second element of what comprises a good game, and the idea is that games have goals, and that's what helps the player, actually focus on what to do and when to do it. And goals in games can either be implicit or they can be explicit. For instance, you may need to figure out the goal, during the course of gameplay. That would be implicit. You may know it from context or the genre of other games like fighting games. Or the goal can be clearly stated like, the strategy games with specific winning conditions. This picture here comes from The Legend of Zelda, an oldie but goodie. The next slide has to do with adaptive challenges. This is another really important element of good games. So really good game designers are very keenly aware of just how to strike a perfect balance between the difficulty level of a game and the abilities of the player. And really good games just stay right at the outer edges of a player's ability, making the game neither too easy or too frustrating, which is a highly motivating state for learners. And it's just missing in too many environments where, for example, teachers tend to teach right towards the middle. This game here is a picture from Demon's Soul. Okay, the next slide should be entitled Control. And control in games has to do with two different facets. One is the player's control over the gameplay and the game environment. And this has to do with the ease of use of the game control devices and also the ability to customize a game to fit with, personal preferences. The second aspect has to do with the player's control of their own learning, and this involves having the option to be able to play as slowly or as quickly as you want to, or as minimally or as obsessively as you want to. And again, classrooms offer just precious little student control, of either of these types. This picture here, I picked, this is a game called Braid, which has just absolutely awesome controls in terms of space and time, and you can even clone yourself in that. Advancing to the next slide should be some screen captures from some of my personal devices. If anybody wondered about how I like to control my environment, these show, this is from Angry Birds and from a game called Crayon Physics. And if there's 135 stars to be gotten, I will persist until I get all 135 stars, and the same with the islands in Crayon Physics. The next slide should be entitled Feedback. And feedback refers to the information or the rewards to players about their performance during the game. And feedback can either be explicit, like with the goals, like scores or dying, or it can be implicit, which is the game is increasing in its difficulty. And as we all know, timely feedback has really positive effects on learning. And it's nearly impossible to achieve this in a class with about 25 different students. This game here is an awesome game. It's Oblivion. And if anybody's interested, the fifth version of this is coming out. It's called Skyrim on 11/11/11. So advancing to the next slide, it should be entitled Uncertainty. And uncertainty evokes a sense of suspense and engagement. What's going to happen next kind of thing. So if a game is telegraphing its outcome, or if it's seen as being too predictable, it's just going to lose all of its appeal. This game here is one of my all-time favorites. This is Little Big Planet. And I wish I could have this more interactive, but again, I have no feedback, which is really sad. The next slide should be sensory stimuli. And this refers to the combination of graphics and sounds and the storyline that's used in games to excite the senses and to make the neurons dance. And it doesn't really require any kind of professional graphics or sound to be compelling. The example here I've got is the game Tetris, which some of you know, which is a very simple game graphically, and the little Russian riff in the game is very simplistic too, but it's a very compelling game. So the next slide shows all the bits and pieces coming together. It's called the Gestalt of games. So the idea is that when all the elements come together in a game, this produces a totally engaging and magical experience where people want to play and replay the game and solve really hard problems, because reaching goals in these kinds of environments is just highly rewarding. You can see the sweet spot in the very center of it. So the next slide is just a transition slide that should say learning, and you can advance to the next slide, which is a picture of a cradle and a headstone. So in terms of learning, I see it as a lifelong process of accessing and interpreting and evaluating information and experiences that we run into every day, turning those into knowledge, skills, and values and dispositions. And this is a broader view of learning compared to traditional views, which tends to ask things like, did the student remember X and Y on a particular test? Learning also represents a change from one point in time to another point in terms of knowing, doing, believing, and so forth. And this change is not necessarily linear, or it's not just an accumulation of stuff. It can reflect different kinds of qualitative changes as well. So the next slide that should be coming up, I need to pause and see if anybody's still here, because again, it's like me in the Antarctica all alone with an iPhone stuck to my head. If any, can you still...
Val? Yeah. Val, I'm just going to come in here and let you know that yes, we're hearing everything. We're seeing all the slides, and I know it must be really frustrating at your end. But I also just want to let you know there's a lot of text chat going on, and we're probably going to give the prize to Chad Hable for identifying every one of your games. It looks like he spends his whole life playing games from the text chat that we've got here. So I am very sorry that you didn't see all of that because it's actually been quite lively, the text chat.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, I feel like I'm the only one here talking to myself, but I'm so happy to hear that people are playing along. But perhaps, if this is recorded, I can see the recording at some time in the future and, maybe see what I'm missing right now because I'm so sad to miss out on this. It's really a peculiar situation. But let's continue because I want to get to the heart of the matter, which is the self-assessment. And I wanted to frame it in terms of what are the elements of good games and what do I mean by learning. And now, I'm getting ready to segue into the self-assessment part of the story. So learning theory slide should be up right now. And that should be some kids with blocks. And the theories of learning that are really best suited for this kinds of games and learning research are social constructivism and situated learning, and this harkens back to Dewey and Vygotsky and Piaget, and more currently to Jim G., Sasha Baroff, Dave Jonathan, and so forth, where the idea is that the learner is a very active agent in this whole process. Now, for learners who are, initially kind of timid or without adequate foundation, scaffolding can and should be employed in this situation. So, in fact, games use various ways to supply this kind of just-in-time content in terms of feedback and non-player characters and hints and so forth. Now, the ultimate goal, and this is in my opinion, is to produce autonomous, curious, active, and engaged human beings. So the next slide should show a series of kinds of learning. And the idea is that too long, we've been focusing, and I can testify to, what's going on in this country, but we've been focusing on content as learning. That's the declarative and procedural knowledge that's explicitly taught in school. That, again, is like the 3 R's, the reading, writing, and arithmetic. But there's so much more to learning than that. And here's some other kinds of complex competencies which can be assessed and supported in games. There's, a list of cognitive skills and some 21st century competencies listed. These are all things that we're looking at now in games. Next slide should show some learning outcomes. So games can help improve outcomes that are just beyond and maybe more important than, just increasing test scores, which was just a huge focus in the 20th century. And unfortunately still lingers today in the United States. Here's some other outcomes on the right-hand side that can be considered relative to games and learning. Okay, now the next slide is one that I crafted, and I really like this slide here. I was thinking square peg and round hole, and then I went, no, it's more like a dodecahedron. So I got a picture of one and crafted this slide. So the point is that games are multifaceted, and they don't fit nicely into a traditional narrow whole of content learning. And really, if you want to assess and support more complex knowledge, skills, and understanding, you've got to use well-designed games with embedded and valid performance assessments and not multiple choice or short answer kinds of tests. So this brings us now to the main part of the story, which is ways to design and use, really good assessment. So next slide is a transition slide for assessment design. And if you blow past that to the next slide, which should be a formative assessment slide, and it starts with an analogy with a bowl of soup right in the center. I'm going to just presume that's up. I'm back to a white screen and black at the bottom. When the cook tastes the soup, that's formative. When the guest...
Yes, Val, it's up.
Okay, good. So in order to figure out just what, if anything, is being learned or honed in good games, we really need to be able to assess the player along various dimensions and at different points in time. So formative assessment allows this kind of periodic pinging of the player. So I'd like to talk about how to create really excellent assessments now. So the next slide should show evidence-centered design. There's some red curtains in that slide. And here, with regard to evidence-centered design, it has two main foci. The first is that ECD provides a way to reason about assessment design, and it also provides a way to reason about student performance. So the next slide should show three elongated oblongs called assessment design. So in ECD, the assessment design process actually starts by defining three main models. There's the competency model, the evidence model, and the task model. And the competency model addresses the issue of just what do you want to say about the person relative to knowledge, skills, dispositions, beliefs, and so forth. The evidence model addresses the issue of what observations, what does the student have to say or do that would provide the best evidence for what it is that you want to say, referring back to the competency model. And then the task or the action model addresses the issue of what are the features or what kinds of tasks do you need that would let you make the necessary observations. So this provides a very systematic way of laying out an assessment that's complete with evidentiary arguments that explicitly link performance data, which are observable and grabbable and measurable, from gameplay, for instance, back up to claims about underlying competencies, which are latent and unobservable. So the next slide should be the design and diagnosis, and these are the three models again in their flow, and going from left to right is basically what I just illustrated, where you start with a competency model, and this involves identifying and structuring the relevant variables that you're interested in. Going to the evidence model, this involves establishing the specific relationships among the variables from the competency model to their associated metrics, how you're going to measure them. And finally, the task of the action model, which involves defining the features of tasks that are needed to get good evidence for the evidence model. Now, the cool part of this is when you reverse the flow and you go from right to left, this permits, this lets us accomplish diagnosis. So if you see on the right-hand part of the picture, there should be a yellow rectangle with some jumbled shapes inside of it. So that's, say, a series of stuff that a person did in the solution of some problem. That could be a number of different actions. Those then are submitted to the evidence model, which then parses and scores it. So those little blue boxes associated with the yellow rectangle are the scored data. The scored data then get linked back up to the nodes from the competency model, which then updates those nodes. And when those updated nodes are reinserted back into the competency model, it lets us know at any point in time how well a person is learning, what and to what degree a person is learning. So the next slide is another transition slide, and it should be labeled self-assessment. We can just blow past that to the next slide, which talks about, shows the features of self-assessment. So before defining it, before defining self-assessment, I'm going to show just a couple of features here. These are represented in those two pictures. The first is that it allows for very seamless and ubiquitous assessment, where the assessment is just woven directly into the learning environment, and it's available at any and all times. And it also provides comprehensive and accurate learner models, especially in relation to the 21st century competencies. So self-assessments can be aligned along three different dimensions. They can be aligned vertically across levels of the educational system. They can be aligned horizontally across, say, assessment, instruction, and the curriculum. and they can vary temporally across the lifespan. So the next slide shows a metaphor, and I just love metaphors. But this represents an important shift that happened several decades ago in the world of retail outlets, from small businesses to very large department stores. So in 1974, the very first product with a barcode was scanned. It was a pack of juicy fruit gum, and today that gum is in the Smithsonian Institute here in Washington. So the next slide is continuing with this metaphor. So before 1974, businesses had to just shut down once a year in order to take inventory of their stock. But with automated checkout and with barcodes for all items, these businesses have access to a continuous stream of information that can be used to monitor the inventory and the flow of items. So businesses today can continue on without any interruption at all, and we could use the information that we get, from all the data that's coming in from barcodes to monitor trends, and then aggregate the data into different kinds of summaries and support real-time, just-in-time inventory management. So you can probably see where I'm going with this, as far as you could transition to the next slide. This is in relation now to school. So with new assessment technology, schools should no longer have to interrupt the normal instructional process at various times during the year to administer these external tests to students. Instead, assessment can be continual and invisible to students in supporting, this idea of real-time, just-in-time learning. So the next slide should be a picture of some ghosts in the background. It was the best I could do. So my STEP assessment idea uses evidence-centered design to craft models that are then embedded within interactive learning environments like good games. And this is all made possible because, as you see here, advances in the measurement let us administer evidence-centered and evidence-based assessments, and that allows us to extract ongoing information from the learner, and this lets us make accurate inferences of competencies, and that allows us to react in immediate and helpful ways. And all this is accomplished by automated scoring and machine-based reasoning techniques. And the idea is that when assessment is so seamlessly woven into the fabric of the learning environment that it's invisible, that's what I mean by self-assessment. So the next slide is a transition slide, and you can blow past that and go to systems thinking slide, and that's the example that I'm going to be providing. And again, just a reality check. I hear nothing, I see nothing. So Jeffrey or Matthew, can you just say if we're on a systems thinking slide?
Yes, Val, we're on the systems thinking slide and everything's going fine. Thanks very much for persevering at your end.
Oh, my pleasure. So here the point is, is that the example that I'm going to give is systems thinking. I'm going to be doing this, describing self-assessment of systems thinking within a game environment. So the bottom line of systems thinking is that it involves understanding and reasoning about complex systems in terms of their elements and their relationships. And there should be a picture of a bunch of people in a traffic jam and, obviously not understanding that they're part of a wider system. It involves understanding systems and our role within them, which is really important if we want to be able to solve complex problems or wicked problems that may be related to, environmental or political or social or economic and other kinds of systems. I think the next slide should be a continuation of the systems thinking, where it further describes systems thinking about understanding how systems, should be functioning as a whole, through a dynamic interaction and all the interconnected bits and pieces, and also the direct and the indirect effects of feedback loops. I think this slide should have some pictures on it, a common feedback loop, involving a thermostat and then a more complex system at the bottom. I'm now getting feedback, audio feedback of myself talking, which is adding a third level of difficulty. But the point is, systems thinking is real important, and it's not just me saying it. It's also been identified as a really important skill by a number of different bodies, like the Federation of Scientists and the National Science Education Standards in this country. So the next slide should show a competency model. This is a stripped-down, simplified version of the competency model for systems thinking. And this arose after an extensive literature review by one of my students, Taiga, on this topic. And it's actually prior to the most current conceptual model of systems thinking. And we've had it validated by a number of different leading systems thinking experts. So there should be some rectangles that are in blue. Those are the ones I'm going to be focusing on in the example. Just that fragment that starts with conceptually modeling this system and going down to something that should be circled with a red circle, which is creating causal loop diagrams. So to see how this model can actually be used within an actual game, I'm going to show the game that we used in this example right now. So the next slide should show Taiga Park. And this is an immersive role-playing game. It's set in a modern three-dimensional world. This is designed and developed by Sasha Barab and his group in Indiana, and he's now down in Arizona. So the problem is you come into this game, into this world, and you're an intern to Ranger Bartle. He's a park ranger of Taiga Park. And you're instantly confronted with this huge problem. He tells you that the fish in the Taiga River are dying, and it's a big deal. And you have to solve the problem to save the park. And you kind of get sucked into it right off the bat. So Taiga Park has three different groups who use or depend on the river in some way. There's the Mulu farmers who are indigenous to the park. There are some loggers that are there cutting down the trees for income for the park. And then there's a fly fishing company that hosts tournaments along the river. So these groups are very different from each other, but their lives and their livelihoods are very much interconnected. This game actually shows several levels of systems within the world, from low level, from river-related ecological systems to more higher level kind of social, political, economical level. So it's very layered and just exquisitely lovely. So the next slide, I believe, should show the goal of the research, which is to test the viability of this idea of self-assessment within an immersive game, to measure and support systems thinking skills, like the ability to be able to identify elements and relations in the system, like what are the things that are causing the fish to die. So if you want to go to the next slide, this should show ECD models in Taiga Park. Top down.
That started to break up again now. I'm sorry.
Okay, can you hear me? This sounds like a Verizon commercial in this country. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry, Val. It was just starting to break up a little bit. So, yes, that's fine now. Yep.
Okay, so we should be at a slide that says ECD models in Taiga Park.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm just my own voice coming back at me with about a 1 to 2 second delay, which is really creepy. But anyway, going from top down, oh, this is weird. but there's the competency model. This is the fragment of the competency model that I mentioned earlier, modeling the system. And if you look down, and it's kind of in the middle, to the create causal loop diagrams, that's one of the nodes in the competency model that we're going to be focusing on in the example. So that's the drawing. CLD stands for causal loop diagram. Drawing a causal loop diagram that shows the factors affecting the fish population. The next rectangle down is the evidence model, and this is what statistically links the unobservable variables from the competency model, those are the theoretical constructs, to the observables that's in the task or the action model, and that serves as the glue between the theoretical and the data, or the unobservables and the observables. And the bottom rectangle is the action model, and this, for any given mission or quest, consists of an action taken in the environment and the associated indicators, where an action is anything that's done towards solving a problem, and then each action is defined in terms of its associated indicators. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to reverse the flow and give you an example here, which is, so one of the things that you have to do early on in the game is Ranger Bartle has you, the player, the intern, go off and interview some of the stakeholders. Again, there's 3 different stakeholders, 3 different types of stakeholders. There's like 20 people. So you go and interview 10 people, say, from all the different groups. And after interviewing the stakeholders, suppose you, or I'm going to be using a hypothetical student named Clara in the example coming up. So suppose Clara is asked to assign blame to just one of the stakeholders and then create a causal loop diagram showing how what their actions are doing are causing the fish to die. So you or Clara would build, draw a causal loop diagram showing the factors that cause the fish to die, and then the associated indicators there would represent the accuracy of the variables that you include in your picture, as well as the accuracy of the links between them in terms of the direction and the strength. So that causal loop diagram is then submitted to the evidence model. This is all done automatically under the hood of the game, and the evidence model then analyzes the causal loop diagram using the scoring rubrics to assess the important indicators of the causal loop diagram. Those scored data are then reinserted back into the competency model, and this allows for accurate real-time estimates of competencies at various grade sizes. And this all sounds really abstract at this point, and I do make it concrete in the example coming up. So the next slide should be entitled Automated Causal Loop Diagram Assessment. There should be a picture of Clara's actual initial causal loop diagram. So when a student interacts with the game, there's different indicators that are calculated, and then the data are inserted, like I said, into the base net. So what we're using is a program called JMAP that's developed by one of my colleagues for analyzing the causal loop diagrams. It's also used to create them as well. So suppose that Clara, this hypothetical student, created 2 causal loop diagrams, one during an initial session and then during a final session in Taiga Park. And the picture that should be what you're looking at is a causal loop diagram where you see that cutting down trees is positively related to the amount of soil erosion, which increases the amount of sediment in the water, which she has as linked inversely to the fish population. So she's blaming the loggers. She's seeing the sediment in the water as being the primary factor affecting the decline in the fish population. So that looks pretty good at first glance, but how can we assess it more objectively? So if you go to the next slide, this shows the automated I'm not sure at this point because I had to break up some of the slides, and I don't see what you all are seeing. I see whiteness and blackness, period. But I think what you're seeing should be the idea that causal loop diagrams that are created with this JMAP tool, it takes each picture that a person generates and then translates it into a transitional frequency matrix, which should be shown on the next screen. So if you can advance it, and I think in theory there should be a transitional frequency matrix. So for any given causal loop diagram or any kind of concept map, you can establish, you can set up a matrix for it, which are all the, say there's 8 different variables that some experts have noted as being important in defining, the death of the fish attributable to loggers. And so this should be showing how for any pairwise comparison, like the Taiga Park income is inversely related to the need for more logging. And so you have different numbers defining the different strengths and different directions showing the positive versus the negative relation. So if you go to the next slide, it should show how once you have those data from everybody can draw whatever kind of picture they want. And then once those data are put into a matrix format, then you're able to do a lot of different things. You can aggregate matrices together to make group matrices. You can re-represent those back out into standardized pictures, which is automatically done with this program called JMAP. So it automatically reproduces and presents each map via some standardized template. This one that's showing, I think, what you may be seeing is an expert's representation, where the solid lines are what the student has actually presented, and the hashed lines are what the expert represented, but we're missing from the student's data. So JMAP supports comparisons with other maps. So this picture that you should be looking at is Clara's map that she's drawn, overlaid onto the expert map. So basically what she has done is she's omitted a series of variables from her causal loop diagram. She went right from sediment in the water to fish population, but she forgot that sediment in the water actually is positively related to the temperature of the water, which is inversely related to the dissolved oxygen, and that's actually what's affecting the fish population. And one other thing to point out in the slide, if you're seeing this, is that JMAP also produces some quantitative measures, and these provide some kind of indication of similarity. So at the bottom right-hand corner, you should see a number with a red circle around it. This is the degree of overlap between the person's model, causal loop diagram, and some expert's representation of it. And I'm so sorry that I can't see anything. So if you all are having, this is probably, I'm probably not describing it that clearly, and I'm not getting any feedback, so I don't know if anyone is lost, and I apologize if you want to go to the next slide. So like I just mentioned, Clara, was missing some important nodes in her initial causal loop diagram, but she did have accurate links that were present in her picture, among the nodes that she did have. So if we use some kind of cutoff values, and we can use the value that the previous slide showed, which was there's a 62.5% overlap between her diagram and that of the expert. We could use cutoff scores to assign whether her diagram was low, medium, or high. So hers would be classified in the medium range as far as the accuracy of the nodes that were present, and her links could be assigned a value of high. Then those data, this is a little BaseNet, little fragment of the BaseNet that you should be seeing right now, where at the bottom are the indicators, the accuracy of the nodes and the accuracy of the links. Those data are inserted into the BaseNet, and the entire network is updated. So this then provides, for the ability to be able to diagnose how a person is doing at any point in time, and also serve as a basis to give, pretty targeted support. So if you go to the next slide, we see that, this allows not only for up-to-date estimates of competency levels, but it also allows support for learning by way of feedback, not only by the computer, but to also be for the teacher as well. There should be a slide that says support for learning with verbal and visual components to it, where for the verbal feedback, the system could say something like, "Nice job, Clara, but you forgot to include the fact that sediment increases water temperature, which decreases the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. That's the reason the fish are dying. They don't have enough oxygen." As far as the visual feedback, the student can, elect to either have one or the other or both, depending on what they want. So the lab technician or some other character in Taiga part can provide feedback in the form of a causal loop diagram that highlights different variables in the picture, like the ones that are should be in black. And that way she can see for herself just what she left off. So the next slide should be the wrapping up phase. And I see that I need to take off for work very soon. But if we're at the wrapping up slide, then the ideas here are straightforward. So preparing students to succeed in the 21st century, we really need to support new competencies, things like, creativity and the ability to solve complex problems with systems thinking skills. And there's also a big need to design and develop assessments that are valid and reliable in order to meet these new educational needs. And I contend that using evidence-centered design and self-assessment may be helpful in this. I also believe that immersive games are very fun and engaging, and they enable learning to take place within complex and realistic and, meaty and interesting environments. And this can lead to, all sorts of things like social negotiation, learning, and so forth. The next slide should show a picture on the right-hand screen, which are vowel skills. So base nets can be used. You can use other kinds of statistical machinery. Base nets are just what we've been using in the last several years. They could be used in different ways to improve learning and performance. They allow you to continuously gather evidence in real time for, accurate estimates of competencies. And then this information that you get on the competencies can be used by, teachers of the system or by students themselves, by teachers, to make adjustments to their instruction, by the system to select, new gaming experiences, or by the students to, just be able to reflect on just how they're doing at any point in time. So current estimates, of the different competency levels can be put right directly into the game and shown as progress indicators. And suddenly, instead of just, seeing what your health and your weapon status is, if you include, systems thinking and creativity or whatever into the mix, your problem-solving skills, this elevates, these valued competencies to the same level as, as what your health and your weapon status is. So suddenly kids are vying to, improve their system thinking skills. So the next, I guess this is the last slide here. To address, this is the summary slide, to address the, different kinds of educational challenges and harness the potential of immersive games, I tried to present an evidence-centered design idea that involved specifying the different kinds of competencies to be acquired from the game, then defining evidence models that link game behaviors to the competencies, and then updating the learner model regularly. So using evidence-centered design and self-assessment in conjunction with some automated data collection and analysis tools helps us collect valid evidence of students, emerging competencies. And, this will serve to reduce the teacher's workload and, allow them to, put more attention on, fostering student learning. And there's tons and tons of next steps involving, adapting the content in the game in terms of the feedback or the difficulty levels, the scaffolding, and so forth, to fit the current needs of the player. I'm in the process now. I just had a new Gates grant started the beginning of this month using a wonderful game called Crayon Physics, where I'll be embedding 3 self-assessments for creativity, persistence, and physics understanding, Newtonian physics. And I'll also be seeing the degree to which these models that I developed can be plugged and played into a different game, which I'll probably use the World of View, similar kind of physics stuff going on in there, evaluating learning effects and so forth. So at this point, I'm going to stop. And I have no idea how we're going to have the question-answer period because I see nothing. So what should we do?
Okay, Val, I just want to say, first off, thank you very, very much for persisting with all of that. You've given us a brilliant talk under extremely difficult situations from point of view. I just wanted to assure you, though, that we saw all the slides. They're all in sync with what you were saying. So at this end, it was all fine. So I do want to just, first of all, thank you, certainly for your sense of persistence, but also your good humor to keep going. I think a lot of people would have just given up. So first of all, thank you very, very much for doing that. The content was absolutely
strong suit.
Interesting. It was very, very interesting. What I'll do is I do really have to go off to work soon. But there's a couple of questions that people want to ask. So, Catherine, you're on first, so we'll let you go first, Catherine. Yeah, Catherine, just take the mic and talk. Yeah, just hold. Okay, Catherine, to talk, you might be able to put your question in the text box, and then we'll be able to see it that way. And is there anyone else who wants to ask a question while Catherine might be doing that? Val, this is Jeff here. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was this whole idea of flow. And certainly with games, one of the really interesting things is that you don't interrupt the flow for the participant. And certainly in education, we're interrupting the flow the whole time with students. And what we do is we obviously separate the learning from the assessment. We separate that from the feedback. And one of the really nice things about games, of course, is that all of that is continuous. And that's what you were bringing up tonight here, well, during the day there, but tonight here. And I thought, yeah, that's the sort of thing that we really need to spend a little bit more time on thinking about in terms of our curriculum design, so that we don't have learning and assessment as time and space separated activities.
Yeah, I heartily agree. And a couple months ago, I was at a conference out at USC, and it was hosted by the MacArthur Foundation and the Gates Foundation. And what was really cool there was about, I guess, 100 of us that were invited out to it. And it was different assessment experts and learning experts and content experts and game designers. And there was people from, a lot of Will Wright was there. I mean, there's a lot of really, really cool people. But the idea, we broke out into a 2-day session into groups of about maybe 7, 8, 9 people. And it was a very heterogeneous group. So each group consisted of, an assessment person and a content person and some game designers and so forth. And we proceeded to build out prototypes for games with this mixed group kind of setting. And then we presented them at the end of the 2-day workshop thing. And what was particularly cool was, well, you know that when educators try to make games, they really suck. And when, game designers are, required to put content in, it kind of takes away. So the ideal situation is actually trying to formulate these heterogeneous mixes of game designers coupled with, educators into some kind of way to be able to create these games that, game designers kind of intuitively have this idea of flow, which is staying in the optimal, kind of outer edges of doability. But wouldn't it be awesome if we were able to, under the hood, keep, current states of the student, know what their current levels were, so that we would be able to increase things along this dimension or decrease things, on this dimension too. So I fully agree, that this is real important. And there are some embryonic efforts starting to, have the design effort at the outset consider assessment instead of having it thrown on in a post hoc kind of ad hoc, way, which is, oh yeah, here's a game, let's do an assessment, on top of it. Rather, assessment is thought of at the very beginning, which is, what are the competencies that we want to focus on, within this game environment. And tons of different kinds of competencies are present in any given game. Just to get to the next level, tons of problem-solving skills have to be executed.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, do you want to try your question, or do you want to try the talk button now and see if you can actually ask the question?
I'm really curious about the practicalities of this. Of all those games that you showed us, there really only seemed to be one that was the river was about specifically about learning. So, like, how much does it cost to do a particular game, and are there any higher education as opposed to, say, school level, high school or primary school level?
You broke up during part of that, but I think your question was about practicality. And of the games that I displayed, only one was a, quote, educational game. That was on purpose. The ones that I displayed illustrating the different elements of good games were commercial games, things like Oblivion and Demon's Soul and Tetris and so forth, just, regular casual or commercial games. But I think that there's a lot, in terms of practicality, there's a couple different responses to that. One, in terms of the cost. Some games, like the game that I'm doing right now that I alluded to, called Crayon Physics Deluxe. This is developed by an independent game designer. His name is Patrick Perho. And he's actually, I'm testing it out with several hundred middle school students right now as far as their learning of physics, as measured by pre and post test kind of thing, but also changes in their creativity and their persistence as a function of going through the game. And he's, these kinds of games are, you can purchase them for $10. They exist as different kinds of apps, either for free or download. So I'm not sure if the question is more along the lines of, a cost issue, because for the study he's providing, free licenses for everybody, or the practicality in that some run on consoles. I'm not really sure of the nature of the question, but I think that whether it's higher ed or K-12, that games serve, some potentially, and again, these are still at the stage of claims right now, and that's where empirical kinds of testing and empirical kinds of studies have to take place. But a number of different important and complex critical thinking skills is really important for higher education. And these are required in games as well as problem solving, really complex problems, as well as reading and all sorts of different kinds of competencies that I think are required not just in K-12, but, lifelong. Did that answer your question at all? I didn't hear the whole question.
The right direction.
I did hear higher ed.
I guess I can and say, okay, so how much money does it cost to build this physics game? And we need to build 3 or 4 games for every discipline for their basic unit. If it was $50,000 a game, then you're looking at an awful lot of money to get that kind of work done.
As I mentioned, with the crayon physics example, that game already exists. I don't know how much it costs, and it doesn't really matter because it could be made available, in schools as some kind of deal with structure. But the critical issue is that within crayon physics, there's a level editor, and more games have these level editors where, like with Neverwinter, I forget what the game is, Never Ending Winter. Many games, even Little Big Planet, comes with tools and shells that allow you to create your own problems. So we've been in the last couple of weeks building a whole bunch of different islands and levels and problems in crayon physics where all you do is set up your own. You have an interface where you make your own. I have a physicist that's working on the project with me, and he's been going crazy building all sorts of different kinds of problems that evidence different kinds of physics principles that he wants to get at in relation to Newtonian laws of motion. So he's developed maybe a dozen, in the last couple of days. And that's for free. So you can, it's not a matter of, and I'm not really sure because again, I don't know if you can hear me as a continuous stream of auditory, as a continuous stream of words, but I only heard a couple of your words and it sounded like you were concerned about the cost to build games. I'm not envisioning this as a takeover of all of education. I'm seeing it as a supplement in the classroom, perhaps in the physics classroom for a game like crayon physics or and so forth. So this is, very, very early on as far as, embryonic research. But the first step is do these kinds of games, whether they're commercial, existing games or ones that are built from scratch, do they, in fact, support learning for a large group of people? I hope that made sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Val. And thanks, Catherine, for your questions too. There's a couple of other questions or comments that people have put in the text box as well. But one of the comments, if you don't mind, I'll make on this, Val, is that I think part of the issue about games and looking at games is not always about having to make a game for everything, but looking at the theory behind the design principles that are used to make the games, especially around this idea of flow, not interrupting flow, incorporating assessment as part of the learning activities, building those in as part of the curriculum design. And I think part of the thing that certainly in higher education that we need to be looking at is, okay, let's take those ideas, and we don't always have to design a game around everything, but we can design other activities for students to do in higher education that use some of those principles around good game design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a school I've been working with in the last couple of years in New York City. It's called Quest to Learn. And the whole school is based on a kind of a game-based pedagogy where kids, and it's not a school where kids go and they play games all day, but rather the curriculum, the pedagogy is all structured around kids have quests that they have to solve. It's very much taking, kind of the excellent principles design principles of games coupled with, instruction or pedagogy, and having kids. They don't have any tests at this school at all, but rather they have boss levels at the end of each trimester, which are very rich and meaty and very, very substantive. Like one of the boss levels after the first trimester is for the students working in groups of, say, 5 people to build a Rube Goldberg device. I don't know if you know what that is, a complex system that achieves some function. So each team would get a different kind of outcome that they had to achieve, like turn on the water faucet or, do something to the computer. And so they each had spaces like, 15 by 15 foot physical spaces where they created ramps and they used springs and they used pulleys and they used, all sorts of different things, within a 2-week period to demonstrate problem-solving skills and communication, all the things that you need to do when you work together in a team, communication skills, and, a big, heavy emphasis on systems thinking skills in order to understand how the bits and pieces, and design thinking and, some engineering for actually building out the system. And then each person had to give a podcast, describing their system and how it functioned and so forth. So that as a test, I think, is absolutely awesome, because when you then teach to the test, which is, something as substantive as, building out a Rube Goldberg device, then suddenly you're, elevating really important kinds of competencies rather than just, memorization of, X, Y, and Z on a given test.
Yeah, thanks. Now, were there any other comments or questions that people wanted to ask? You're quite welcome to take the mic. Yes, Scott, would you like to ask a question or make a comment? Okay, I'm not sure whether other people are going to ask any more questions or not, Val, but I do actually realise that you probably do have to actually get off to work as well. And you've been very generous with your time today. So maybe at this stage we might draw this to a close and just say once again, Val, thank you very much for the presentation today. A couple of people asked about the slides, and we've recorded this, so I'm assuming that the slides will actually come out on the recording. But the other thing we might do, Val, if you don't mind, is just see whether you've got a link to these slides, or we could put the slides on the Transforming Assessment website, which people could have a look at as well. But we can talk about that later. But Val, thank you. This was probably one of our more difficult ones in terms of the technology. So thank you very much for sticking with that. But I'm glad we got the audio from you in the end. And even though you couldn't see any of the slides, please be rest assured that we could certainly see it all from this end, and it was very good. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, absolutely, you can use put the PowerPoint slides on the website and whatever you want to do. And I hesitate to be able to. I'm not sure whether I will look at that presentation because it felt so rough and so blind doing it. But thank you for inviting me. And now I must run off to work. And bonsoir, sweet dreams to y'all.
Okay, thanks very much, Val. Good night.
Thanks, Val.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. I can assure you it worked very well, Val, so don't worry about that.
And you might want to stop the recording now.